idea. I was scheduled myself twice in a row, so here we go. You heard last night about little Tommy Morris's, if you were here for movie night, his trip to Walt Disney World as a 12-year-old.
Really? You told that story last night?
I did tell, Tony told that story while you were sitting next to him last night.
Okay. Well, that must have been a good drink.
I needed an opening graphic, so I thought that was as good as any.
That's me, 12-year-old Tommy Morris.
Yes.
October 1st, 1971. Here for one day. And then, actually I went to Atlanta after that because my aunt and uncle were out there on business. And but I got to see Walt Disney World on opening day. And why I was so determined to do that is still a mystery to me, but I think it was because I always wondered about what Disneyland was like on opening day. And I thought, well, this is the last time there'll ever be another Disney park. The only time there'll ever be another Disney park, because they've never talked about any other park. So this is the only chance in my lifetime to be at a Disneyland park on opening day. And so I did it with the help of Jack Sayers, who's on my paper route. I had interesting people on my paper route. Jack Sayers was the vice president of lessee relations. Holly Holscher was one of the VIP hostesses and was kind of, in a way, in charge of the preview center along with Bill Holscher. I guess they weren't related. And who else was? And then on a friend's paper route that I usually had to collect for my friend and substitute for my friend was Thurl Ravenscroft. So I had these interesting people on my paper routes. Yeah.
That is networking. That surely is.
Absolutely. Always in it. So we asked Tom to dig through his archives and come up with some cool stuff to show you that you haven't seen before or may not have quite seen this way. And so I'm going to be in charge of the clicker because it's way too easy for him and Hal to get into the weeds.
Right.
So my job is to get through 118 slides.
And the one preface for this is you found all this stuff in the research for your book. These weren't necessarily things that you were looking for,
correct,
but things that you came across,
correct,
in your adventures of finding stuff.
Right. So Ted Rich was a name I had never heard of before, and this was when I was doing a book on a different topic, which was going to be the archaeology of Disneyland, and I had started the research with New Orleans Square, and I had lunch with Glenn Derflinger, if any of you remember Glenn Derflinger, who was an architect, and he ran the architectural department for a while. And I had a lunch with him about 5 years ago, just shortly before he passed away, and I asked him who designed the facades of New Orleans Square, expecting to hear Bill Martin or another familiar name, and he said, oh, that was Ted Rich. I go, who? And he said, that was Ted Rich. I know that because that was the first job I worked on, and he was the guy who did all of the facades for New Orleans Square. I'm like, wow, I've never heard that name before. And he said, well, you should, because he designed the castle in Florida. Well, I thought Herb Ryman and Bill Martin designed that. And Glenn Derflinger said, no, Herb did a concept sketch, and Bill Martin was the art director for all of Fantasyland. So he was kind of the supervisor in charge, but Ted Rich designed that castle, all four sides of that castle. Wow, that's really interesting. And then there's virtually nothing on Ted Rich in the Imagineering archives or in the Walt Disney archives in Burbank. But Chuck Snyder, who wrote the Windows on Main Street book, is a kind of a detective, and he can track down the family members, or in some cases, he's missing the actual people that have been off the radar for decades. And he gave me the phone number and address of Ted Rich's daughter, who lived in the middle of the Nevada desert, 50 miles from Reno, I believe it was. And so I went out there a couple of years ago. I was up in the Bay Area anyway, and I thought, well, Nevada's nearby. So, but I'm glad I did, because in her closet were all of these Ted Rich, not the original pencil drawings, but these are all what's called oscillids, or commonly called blueprints, but that's kind of a misnomer. This is actually a black line drawing of it. Imagineering does not have this, does not have a copy of this or the original of this. And
you will see there are some differences between what we have and what was here.
So it's pretty much what was built, except that it had to be, it went through value engineering even back then. There was a moment sometime at the end of 1968 or 1969 where the entire resort budget went over, resort project went over budget. And so, things had to be scaled down. So there was going to be a big kind of cathedral, a miniature Notre Dame on the side of this castle with the famous Viollet-le-Duc spire like Disneyland has. And that was value engineered out. There was also some big stained glass windows that, on the opposite side of King Stephen's that were going to look out towards Main Street, and that was cut out as well. But it's a beautiful restaurant. Let's see, why are we? Oh yes, because in addition to the this castle drawing, Ted worked on a bunch of concepts for Walt Disney World Magic Kingdom, and this is the earliest concept for the Plaza or Crystal Palace. It's kind of Crystal Palace on steroids, I would say. It's the Crystal Palace that is there now would fit inside of this. Ted Rich started around 1962. I believe he came over to WED Enterprises from MGM, where he had been a set designer for years, and I think he was pretty sure he was friends with Herb Ryman and Harry Johnson, who were other artists who had come over to Imagineering from MGM and from 20th Century Fox. And the reason I believe he was good friends with Herbie is because Ted Rich works on every Herbie concept from 1962 on. And so it sounds and feels like Ted was Herb's designated person to polish up his concept designs. This was going to go on the other side of the plaza, so it wasn't going to be a Crystal Palace and a Tomorrowland restaurant. It was going to be another big Victorian two-story restaurant. And this is almost imposing, well, maybe it's because it's a brown line and it's old, but it kind of looks haunted. Or maybe it was going to be a haunted mansion restaurant. He did a whole bunch of concepts. He did all of the original schematic drawings for Liberty Square. And this is all happening in 1967, before the project is officially turned on. This is when they were still, when he did those, or some of these, and I think when he did the castle, the project had not been turned on, and in fact, Roy Disney had not decided yet for sure whether they were going ahead with the project. But I think because Ted and Herb had finished up on New Orleans Square and other projects, they didn't have anything to do, and they weren't going to get rid of them. So they got started on concepts for the Magic Kingdom. And so these are some of the concepts for Liberty Square. And there's notations on the bottom of all of these that reference either buildings that are in Philadelphia or Boston or Germantown, which I had never heard of before, but there's a Germantown, right?
Sounds a neighborhood in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and so there's references to those buildings or to certain books with page numbers. And those books, in fact, one of the books is sitting on Walt Disney's desk right now in Burbank, after they restored his office area. So, yeah, it's amazing to see, to read this and then to see that book that's on Walt's desk. So he did, just like now, there was what they called I think it was like the President's Building, and then the Crafts Building, which would have the silversmith and all of those various different crafts in the antique shop, and then the Tavern Building, which became, of course, the Liberty Tavern. So Ted retired when he was finished with Castle, Liberty Square, and the Haunted Mansion. He retired at the end of '67, and he passed away in '68. Now, this is very interesting. This was going to be the Skyway Station, which was going to terminate in Liberty Square, not in Fantasyland. I think it was probably basically the same location, but at this point in time, the boundary line for Liberty Square was a little more to the east, and I don't think they had placed a small world, right next to Liberty Square. Oh, this is the keelboat landing, and so Ted had worked on probably hundreds of MGM films, and therefore he worked under Cedric Gibbons, who was the big hoity-toity art director there. But there were, a lot of other art directors like Jack Martin Smith, who would eventually come to Disney, that Ted would have worked under. So it seems like it was inevitable that Ted Rich would eventually come over to Imagineering. This is a marketplace. Now this is they did do this in a way. It was going to be freestanding, but this is actually now connected to the Waffle House. What do you call it? Well, that's kind of the Dutch style Waffle House. Thank you. So if you exit the Hall of Presidents on that side that exits towards the hub, you'll see a building that looks very much like that. And that's the book that's on Walt Disney's desk right now. Right now, as we speak, like not years ago, right now.
That and Kurt Russell.
Right, that's right. And this was a little, study that I did. So I went and I got, chased down some of those notes from either books or, just from where he said the building was from. And so just that one building on the upper right, when you exit Hall of Presidents, has all of these, origins going back to it. So, they never copied a building ever. But you can see certain buildings that go, that's the inspiration, or they got this little balcony, or they got this idea for a staircase. And so now this is the Haunted Mansion that was designed by Chuck Mile and Claude Coates. So we'll get to the earlier one in a second, but maybe we should go on to the earlier one. So because we all know what that is. And we've heard that this was probably the inspiration, and it probably was. One of the main ones. This is in a book. I forgot the name of the book. Victorian Decorations of the 19th century, something like that. The Disneyland Haunted Mansion is also in it. So this pretty much looks. It's the configuration of the Haunted Mansion here. And I believe that. Let's go to the next one. I went to Sleepy Hollow last year, and because my niece lives up there. And we discovered a home between Yonkers, between Yonkers and Sleepy Hollow, and there's a big mansion there. I think it's on the next one. That was also probably, an inspiration for the Haunted Mansion. And you hear a lot. It's a Hudson River. The style is Hudson River mansion, and I'm like. The Hudson River is like Beverly Hills. There's every type. There's French, chateau, and there's English, brick Tudor homes. And Hudson River is not a style, descriptor. But what this is it is Gothic, kind of Dutch Gothic revival, I guess you could call it. And that's the style that the Haunted Mansion is. But originally it wasn't going to be that. Herb Ryman had a kind of an interesting idea, and Herb is arguably the most talented, along with Harper Goff, designers that ever walked through Walt Disney Imagineering, but they weren't always right. And for some reason, Herb had this idea of it being, like Disneyland's not appearing haunted, but appearing like a typical home that you would find along the Hudson River. So Herb had done his painting. I think Herb did his painting first, and then Ted came in. That was the typical thing, it seems, but who knows? Maybe Ted came up with this idea, and Herb painted it. But it wasn't, it's kind of hot. Everything looks haunted in brown line. But this was the original schematic drawing for the Haunted Mansion with the 2 stretching rooms that stretched. They didn't go up at that time. They hadn't made that determination yet. So you were going to slowly climb up to a higher level, and then the elevators were going to drop you down to a lower level. I think the next drawing shows that, kind of confirms that, because it shows an exit. I don't have a laser pointer right now, but it shows an exit at that lowest level. This was in the recent Walt Disney World book that Steve Benini and Tim O'Day and Kevin Kern did. So that's a color rendering of it. And that's the Herb Ryman rendering of it. It doesn't look very haunted. Yeah, maybe a little. So at some point someone, and they actually modeled this. So I've seen photographs of the model of this version. So this is a little video that demonstrates how and where the stretch rooms were in relation to this building. Because she gave me an extra copy of this, and it has his hand-drawn notes and doodles on it. And so what was I going to say about that? So as Tony mentioned, so Chuck Miles was then the guy, after Ted passed away, Chuck Miles became the art director for Liberty Square, and he did the drawings and the new design for the Haunted Mansion, and there's a model for that, or a photo of a model of that too, but it doesn't have the spikes up on it. So at some point, someone handed it to Claude and said, Claude, would you please make this look like a Haunted Mansion? Now, we're gonna get into the original ideas for the Magic Kingdom, which is something you never see. You only ever see what they built. It's amazing after all this time, like in the Don Hahn, Chris Merrick book on Disneyland that just came out, there are like 15 new plans that we've never seen. And prior to that, they've shown, a handful of those. And Marvin Davis said that he did like 115 or 133 of those plans. And we've seen some of them, but we've never seen the iterations for the Magic Kingdom. And so while I was looking for something else, in a box that had nothing to do with the topic of the box, was a plan from early 1968 of the Magic Kingdom. Go back to the previous slide though for a second. This is 1967, July 1967, and they've just gotten the okay to go ahead with the Florida project. And so they're in a conference room right now. This picture has been posted in various Disney publications over the years, but I was shown a high definition. I requested a high definition version. It's not this one. High definition version of this photograph, and you can read on all of those cards what they were thinking at the time for the Magic Kingdom. And it included almost everything from Disneyland, including the flying saucers, the pack mules, which have been part of Thunder Mesa, a Chinatown, almost everything that was in those souvenir guidebooks, that were predicted for Disneyland and may or may not have ever happened, were on those cards, in addition to extra lands. What I did, rather than showing the plan that I discovered, because that will be a reveal from my book, and it requires clearance and all that stuff, I reproduced the plan in a way that is easier to understand and read.
High quality Imagineering art here.
It's kind of like color forms. So that's the current outline of the park, castle and hub. And in 1968, that would have been the shape of it. It went a little bit further north and across the canal. And they had the Rivers of America, but another big waterway system as part of Tomorrowland, Adventureland. Now the monorail ran through the park, and it had a station in Tomorrowland. And you can see that in the model that was shown last night and this morning. So whatever that was the early 1968 version. And Tony and I were saying that film was probably done for the annual stockholders meeting.
Oh, okay.
Before the previous
Right.
year.
So we bought two versions of that movie, and I think the other one is the one that was in the previous year.
Right. Because that is a really good photo of the model of this plan.
We'll get you stills.
Yeah. So some of the it's full of interesting concepts and ideas, but we'll just go through a few of them. As part of Adventureland, a neighborhood of Adventureland they were calling it Tiki Island. Now, none of the nomenclature had been, squared away because the final menu hadn't been determined. But at this time, they're thinking that the Tiki Room and the Tahitian Terrace and the treehouse are all going to be together on an island that you cross on a bridge over. And that kitchen for the Tahitian Terrace was going to be shared with the Crystal Palace. Of course, in Frontierland, you had Thunder Mesa. I didn't know that Thunder Mesa had 6 or 7 attractions associated with it. So it was not just the Western River Expedition and Big Thunder, it was also a flume ride, a canoe flume ride, a pack mule attraction, a maze, and a shooting gallery, and a diorama for the steam train around the park to go through. So it was a big, it was gonna be a big deal. Haunted Mansion was, you can see, is oriented slightly differently. There's more buffer between Mansion and Small World, and that's because I think that was, they were keeping that open for a 7th land in the back. In the middle there it's a small world with a round entrance. So I've now found the photographs of the model, which had the Disneyland style exterior to it, but in a round configuration. So I guess the boats, you'd load and unload on a big circular kind of configuration. And then these little cut-throughs. There was, in a later plan, there's a cut-through between Liberty Square and Peter Pan, which is still kind of, there's a service corridor back there. And I think at some point they took those 2 buildings, Peter Pan and Hall of Presidents and the Columbia Harbor House, and squished them together. But there was going to be a narrow little, like street vendors area where the silversmith and all that would have gone. But on the right, which held on to the plans for quite a while, was Pinocchio Street, which was a cut through between not Tomorrowland, but Holidayland. So recently, I can't remember on what site, it was Retro, or if it was Widen Your World, there was a picture of the roofless teacups in front of the Tomorrowland terrace. And someone asked, why? This is like so incongruous. Why are there teacups in front of this geodesic dome, very 1970s looking building? And I thought about that for a while, and I went, well, wait a minute. I'm sure that Holidayland was going to kind of serve as a transition between Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. And Holidayland would have put where they would have put, all of the gasoline-powered or diesel-powered. So the 2 Utopias and the motorboat cruise. And I don't know whether the motorboats were going to go out on that little inlet on the right outside of the park, but it indicates that the 2 are connected, and with a train going on top of that. So that was, and also the Skyway station, which ended up being just a transfer station. But the idea in this plan, according to the notes that were on the plan, was that the Skyway from Tomorrowland to Holidayland is one attraction, and then from Holidayland to the old mill, Skyway station was another attraction, with the main station being in Holidayland. So kind of all those things are incongruous anyway, that are kind of, they don't fit the period, are Holidayland. And then you get to Space Mountain with the world's largest, the Space Mountain that they were considering was equal to the Thunder Mesa on the other side. So it was a much larger building. It wasn't a circle. But if you measure the scale of that, it's like 500 feet from top to bottom. So it was going to be huge, but it was going to have, I think, restaurants, and I think they were still considering putting the flying saucers at the bottom of that. But this was the 4-track version of Space Mountain. And then all those circles are basically reserved pads for corporate sponsors that didn't sign up quite the way that they did for Disneyland. And there's also an amphitheater in there. Okay, have I melted this one enough? There are some images I think we'll see that correspond with Tiki Island.
Yeah, you wanted to run your animation.
Oh, sorry. Yes. All right.
There you are.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So I'm showing this because it's on display in the Polynesian Hotel. I didn't think it had ever been published before, but it is a Dorothea Redmond piece that shows Tiki Island. It's not just the Tiki Room, it's the Tahitian Terrace as well. There's another version of it that was done by the art director of the land, whose name it was Howard Brummett. The Magic Kingdom, just like every other castle park that we've ever done, had assigned art directors for each land, and yet I had never known that or known what their names were. And so for Main Street, it was Fred Hope. Adventureland was Howard Brummett. Frontierland, part of Frontierland was Howard Brummett and Chuck Mile. Liberty Square was Chuck Miles. Fantasyland was Bill Martin, and Tomorrowland was Vic Green. And this is the huge Thunder Maze. So this photo has been published in a couple of books, so I felt comfortable showing them. But you can see all of the different, you can see the maze up at the, on the lower photo, on the upper right, you see this kind of, Bryce Canyon style maze. And the flume ride you can see in there. And I'm sure the runaway train is in there somewhere too.
I love that they just said painted desert, like they literally spelled out painted desert with the painted desert.
Yeah, exactly.
In case you didn't get it.
Right. And it's not for the benefit of the train either, which is funny. I could not figure out who did this. And there's a similar version of this. It's not the same one. It's another version of this. It's in Sam McKim DVC lounge that they just opened up in Frontierland. And I kind of assumed it was Sam McKim, except it's not exactly Sam McKim stuff. But it was Mit Natsume, who was a really highly talented Japanese artist in the model shop. At least that's who the WDI Collections has this attributed to, and it's been attributed that way in other books. We're going to get to the artist a little bit later, but this is the Super Space Mountain that had 4 tracks, and the track went outside and inside. And now for the first time you are going to see, they did some different versions of this model. So in some of the photographs I see, these are on a website. If you Google Mit Natsume, there is a Mit Natsume tribute webpage that has been put together by his daughter. So on that photo on the left, Mit is the guy on the right on his knees, and the other guy is Shiransi Omapa, one of the very talented model builders. This is late 1967, early 1968, and it hasn't been cut yet from the project. After there was a money issue. There was also like, can we really do this issue? And there are dozens, maybe hundreds of photos of this model and the different iterations. They put different tops on it. And in some of the photos, you see the other tops sitting off on the side.
And as I recall, there was some engineering fighting over about how to do the ride system.
Right.
This was mostly like the Matterhorn, but as Space Mountain. And then they were like, no, that works okay, but let's do something else.
I'm kind of confused too. I don't think it was so much the technology, because really it was the Matterhorn times 4. So they had done that before. And they had even built a test track for this at Aero Development that we found some photos of. I think it was money. I mean, this thing would have been the cost of the entire resort. So now we're going to go through something that I did purposely go to see because it was nearby, and it was like a 2-month wait, to reserve time at the Getty. They call it the Getty Research Institute. It's part of the museum out there, but there's like a high demand, and so I waited 2 months, and they finally, the time came, and they delivered these big boxes. You have to put on gloves and everything, and practically be sprayed down. And those boxes had the original drawings for the hotels that were deleted from Phase 1, the Persian Hotel, the Venetian Hotel. Strangely, the Asian Hotel and the Contemporary Hotel are with another collection, probably in UC Santa Barbara. So somehow the Belton Beckett collection has been broken apart. But I was shocked to see that they had actually done the working drawings. These may not be the final construction drawings, but if they're just schematic, they're pretty detailed schematic drawings, down to the rooms, down to the restrooms, the fire escapes. And so it was, a serious thing. It wasn't just a dream and a model. They put, some serious manpower into it. I think you'll see on the next one, oh my God. I mean, so there are, 100 or so of these drawings. I'm not going to take you through all of them, thank God, but, just a handful. it gives you an idea of the scale. That's probably, to the top of the dome is probably 120 feet or so, because this is an 8-story hotel. Yeah, it's going to kind of have a huge convention center. Now we're on to the Venetian Hotel, which is inspired heavily by the Hotel Riti in Italy, kind of a Las Vegas version of it. It appears from these drawings. Kind of glad they didn't do this one, at least in this way. It doesn't have the character that real Venice has. But again, it was going to have big ballrooms, big Venetian ballrooms and convention facilities. And all of these, of course, were connected with the monorail. And so then there's some renderings coming up, and I have not confirmed the name of the artist who did these. I was not expecting this. At the bottom of the working drawings, there was only a handful of working drawings for the Contemporary Hotel, because I guess the real working drawings were, ended up somewhere else, but these were kind of the schematics. But at the bottom were these renderings, beautiful watercolor gouache renderings, and there's a Welton Beckett page on Facebook, so I've been talking to the mysterious person behind the Welton Beckett. I don't know if it is a descendant or Welton Beckett Jr., or just a big fan of Welton Beckett's, but we're trying to figure out who did these. There are some marker versions. Let's go on to the next one.
That was the top of the world, right? That we just saw.
This is actually that. Oh, that one is, yeah.
Okay, that's
and the next one is the convention floor area on the third floor.
Second floor.
Second floor, right? And where Nixon said, "I am not a crook." And that was a different retro.
The first RetroMagic was.
Yeah, that's right. These are just beautiful, but what's interesting is if you go into the Contemporary Hotel now, in the lobby, I thought at first they were just faded versions of these paintings, but what they are marker versions, and the markers have faded over time. So they're like really washed out versions of these particular paintings. And I love I don't know, something about this I really like. Even though it's not, my time period, but it's just so well done, so professional.
I like the art there.
Yeah, I do too, actually. I actually do. I think they should bring that back.
Yeah.
So this is also a litho of this is in the Contemporary Hotel lobby, and you've probably seen this image and similar ones for the other hotels and for the park in a lot of the pre-opening booklets and pre-opening materials. And I only recently discovered that these were done by a famous delineator named Carlos Diniz, who Tim Delaney had the privilege of working with. And Carlos Diniz from, I think, Colombia. Ooh, I forgot to do my homework. From South America. And he was hired by all the big architectural firms like Welton Beckett, Herrera, Luckman, etc. And so beginning in 1967, 68, he did the delineations, some of the delineations for the Polynesian, the Contemporary, the Magic Kingdom. That spectacular Space Mountain that we just saw a few slides ago was Carlos Diniz. And then years later, when they were considering the World Showcase that would go sort of in the parking lot, it was actually going to go south. So this is cheated to make you think it's closer to the action than it was really going to be, because they were going to tear out the parking lot. And so many of his works are colored up and would be colored up by different artists at Imagineering, like Ernie Prinzhorn did some of that. And I don't know who actually did the colored version, but this was in the annual report back in the mid-70s, I think, when World Showcase was going to be like an airport. It makes for a very interesting, we call it pigeon planning, when you design something from the air like this and it looks really good, but it may not look good, from the ground. But this piece is actually for sale in a gallery in England, the original rapidograph version of this. And I inquired, and they said, it's $30,000. And I said, who knows what this is in England, you know?
What do they think it is? Mike Douglas footage?
Yeah. And here's Carlos as a young man. I think he was an actor. He started out as an actor. But he did some of the Main Street drawings, like this one, another one that ended up in preview materials. This is actually attributed to Ernie Prinzhorn, but Ernie colored it, I'm certain. Ernie did not sit down with a rapidograph and do that. This was the earliest concepts for Tokyo Disneyland's Main Street. Thank God they didn't do this, but this was someone's idea of cutting the budget for the Main Street portion, I guess, and making it neutral. There's always this worry that no one's gonna understand Main Street. You know, it's like,
Well, I always wondered why it was called World Bazaar, but when you see that, then you're like, okay, they were trying to make it
well,
an
that was
international.
bizarre. Remember, Lyman did do world bizarre versions of that before it became all Main Street. So you can probably find them online. There's like a Barcelona corner and an Italian thing over here in France and everything. So it is kind of like the Harper Goff idea,
Right.
undercover.
You know, and I wonder if there was some, they thought, oh, we'll get people for Epcot, and then we'll get them to go with those same sponsors, international
right.
sponsors, to go into Tokyo Disneyland.
Yeah, could be. Carlos delineated for, oh my gosh, I forgot the name of the architect of the World Trade Center, Yamasaki, I think. So these are just 2 out of a dozen delineations back in the early 70s that he did for the World Trade Center, and they were purchased by Mark Cuban back 20 years or so ago, and he just recently donated these to the Smithsonian Institute. It's kind of interesting, following the careers of some of the people whose artwork we're so familiar with, and we, assume that they're Imagineers, but not always. Okay, I did that kind of quickly, huh?
You said we wouldn't get here, but we
Thank God I put these in.
There's only about 50 slides to get through, so in 2.5 minutes, but we'll get there.
Oh, 2.5, oh shoot. Oh my God. Okay, so this is April 1st, 1968. There's paperwork that goes along with this site walk. And there's also trip manifests. So I have a list of names of these people, of about 12 of the names, but there's about 24 people on this overall sidewalk. So I only have the names of the Walton Beckett people and the Imagineering people. This is the first big walkthrough on the site after Walt. And when Walt was walking the site, it wasn't yet with Imagineers other than Joe Fowler. It was always with the real estate people, the lawyers, the surveyor, and the past owners. Remember Stuckey's?
Yeah.
That's the only photo I can think of that exists. If anyone has one of Stuckey's, because I try to explain what Stuckey's is now to young people, the youngsters, and they go, Stuckey's, what's that? And so they are where the mobile station is right now on the 535. That's where they're standing. That is where they're standing. It's the J.B. Allen construction trailer. So this is the Mayflower Rock for Walt Disney World. This is where you would land if you're working on the project, and your adventures in construction would begin. And so they're about to take a convoy of cars out to first the Magic Kingdom site, and then to the tree farm, and then to Bay Lake, and onto the island. And so here they go. I'm assuming that's the north-south. So I have a lot of detective work to do on these photos. So on this sidewalk, John Hench, Card Walker, Marty Sklar, there's Marty Sklar on the right. Almost all of them have cameras. So I think there are like 10 sets or a dozen sets of cameras and footage from this particular walk. Where is that material? And I don't know if if this comes from Wilton Beckett or from Disney. I'll find out soon. Okay, so now they're on the Magic Kingdom site. That's Card Walker on the far left, and Joe Fowler with his bucket hat on. Oh no, that's Wilton Beckett. And then standing up on the top, we'll go to the next slide. Sorry about that.
The X marks the spot.
X marks the spot, and on the far right is Marvin Davis, the master planner of all of the Walt Disney World property at that time, and he's taking a selfie. always ahead of their time, engineers.
And they're standing on the spot where the castle will be built.
That's right. Next shot is Dick Irvine, who was the head of WED Enterprises from the very, very beginning until around 1973, Tony, 74. He got ill kind of in the middle of this project or shortly before opening, and did not ever return to the property after once it opened because he couldn't fly. That's Dick Nunes's big hairy arm. I think he's pointing out approximately where they are because it looks like they are sort of in the Magic Kingdom area. And on the left is Dick Irvine again, Marvin Davis. Now the guy on the right is John Curry. He was the vice president of hotels, and Disney had never done hotels before. And the Disneyland Hotel was owned and operated by a different company, the Rather Corporation. So this was going to be the first time that Disney actually entered the hotel business, and they needed someone with experience from a hotel dynasty, preferably. And the Hiltons were probably too expensive, and the Marriotts were probably too expensive. So they went to Camp Curry Village in Yosemite, which is, if you've ever been to Yosemite, it's just part of Yosemite. It's the main street of Yosemite. And they also did the Ahwahnee Hotel. So he came from that dynasty, that family. And I think he made it through opening or just before opening. And then it was taken over, I think, by Bob Allen. And Peggy Ferris, I think, joined that team at that time. We have Joe Fowler again. They're still out on the Magic Kingdom site. Okay, so on the right is Welton Beckett. And Welton Beckett organization, big famous architectural firm in Los Angeles that did the Music Center. So many things, I can't mention them all. And so his firm was chosen, and he was also a neighbor of Walt Disney's. So his firm was chosen, go back to the previous slide. His firm was chosen to build the hotels for Walt Disney World. The guy on the left is going to be the architect of the Polynesian Hotel. His name is Pierre Cabral. He designed Progress Land at the New York World's Fair, that big, fantastic dome that lit up at night, and also the Cinerama Dome. And so you never hear his name, you never see his image or anything, but that's him. And these, I do not know who the guy on the left is, I do not know who the third guy is, but John Curry is number 2, and Welton Beckett is there on the right. And Welton Beckett is not going to be alive in 9 months. So that's the other thing that was kind of a shocker to me, was that he passed away at the very beginning of 1969, just in time to enforce that they were going to put the monorail through the Contemporary Hotel, because someone on the Welton Beckett team was griping about it, that it wasn't going to be stable, that it was going to be an engineering problem and a liability and yada, yada, yada. And Welton Beckett said, no, that monorail's going to go through. And then he died. Card Walker. Okay, so the guy in the blue is Jensen, Ted Jensen from G and Jensen. And they were the geosoils people who had to figure out where you should build or could build your structure on the property, and what was muck, what was sinkhole, and what was a new word for me, root mat. Root mat. We are sitting on root mat right now. And this hotel is built on root mat. It's like a foundation. But you don't want to pile, you don't want to dig into root mat. Okay, and that's a whole other scientific discussion. Now they're at the tree farm, and we're going to see the other half of G and Jensen. That is Herb G, and I worked with his daughter on Epcot, Nancy G. Bugman. She was the coordinator of the American Adventure and also of the Journey into Imagination.
I just heard, over from that side. That was very cool. This is the guys know Nancy G. Bugman?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So that is her dad. Her dad facilitated Walt Disney World being, built on this site. And I can assume that Joe Fowler is telling some kind of a big fish story or something that was making her laugh. And we got these, that's the surveyor, I believe, Bill Hart, and he is in the Walt Disney photos when you see Walt Disney on the site walking around. This guy's always in the shot. The guy in the red shirt is from Donovan and Leisure in New York, which was the big law firm that kind of coordinated the whole purchase of the property. And Marty Sklar on the right.
All right, yeah.
And he's got a camera. So now I have to make a call to Leah Sklar. And there they are checking out the trees. And we're gonna see Bill Evans in a minute. And Dick Nunes there on the right.
And now lunch arrives.
Thanks, I mean, that's his job. He's in the hospitality business.
Lunch arrives, and Dick Nunes goes for the beer.
That's right. And so does this guy from Welton Beckett, takes a big chug on the next slide.
It's hot out there.
It's hot out there. And so does Dick Irvine, driving. Private property. Welton Beckett on the left. On the right is the number 2 person at Welton Beckett, Maynard Woodard, who did not design the Capitol Records building, but he was the design supervisor for the Cinerama Dome and so many, you know, the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion and all of those great landmarks. Now they are, I always thought this was Discovery Island, but it's not, it's Fort Wilderness. When you guys get Scott Gerard, we'll have to go through some of these, there's more, and he will tell you exactly where this is. But I think this was kind of close to where that lawnmower tree was.
Yeah.
So now there's, what I always heard was the hunting lodge, which I always thought was on the island, but it wasn't, it was on near the lawnmower tree. And there were 2 of them, which I discovered in these photographs. I just like that picture so much. And there were, it was recorded that there was citrus trees there, and this is proof that, and so here's a rare shot of the interior of one of the hunting lodges, and that's Pierre Cabral, the architect for the Polynesian Hotel.
Probably trying to figure out how it's standing still.
Yeah, exactly. And now I think they're going to, they go across over to Discovery Island, because there's a shot like, you know, might as well be in Africa or South America.
Right. It looks just like that now.
Yes.
Yes, it does. I went there about 10 years ago, and it was creepy. So there's a whole bunch of these photos. Now, this is interesting. I don't know whose wife this is. I originally thought it might have been Marvin Davis's wife, because he always brought his wife on all the trips. But she's too young to be, his wife was related to Walt Disney, Margie Sewell. This is not Margie Sewell. I don't think it's Dick Nunes' wife. I think it's the guy from New York's wife. She's probably the first person since Disney took over the property to dip her feet into the water. I
I
guess.
reset my counter. I think I got 25 seconds to get through these last 6.
Sorry. And they go fishing. And here's a really cool map. That is the snapshot of what they were thinking the resort would be. I think it's a couple months behind. Yeah, it's a couple months behind, because the Magic Kingdom layout is that 1967 layout. And another party, right, this is approximately, yeah. Oh, and then Dick Nunes waving goodbye. That was actually Dick Nunes, yeah.
And you can read all about this and everything else he's talked out in the book Eventually by Tom K. Since the first RetroMagic.
Right. Well, the first one is finished, and we'll be out in about 6 months.
Going to kick us off the stage.
Oh my God.
Thanks, everybody.